Now let's get to the semi-final teams because they are in, and let's start with the Roosters, who are decimated. No Manu, no Swali'i, and of course you can see the changes here. Momorowski comes into the centres, Paulo goes onto the wing, and then the bench, Hutchison, White, Docker, Clay, Turpin and Brown, all named, but there are a few big losses in that Roosters team that is going to hurt them heading to Melbourne in such an important game. How do we see this lineup, given that they have those key players out, Smith as well, who I didn't mention?
Oh, this is extraordinary, guys. That it's Paul Momorowski, for example, he's played two games all year. His last game was in round 9. He's missed largely the season through shoulder surgery and comes into a must-win semi-final. Corey Allen, 12 games this season. Jackson Paulo, last NRL game was back in round 12. Junior Ponga, he's played 8 games in his career for the Roosters. It's a spare parts backline. It's going to be this will be one of the greatest wins in Roosters history if they can pull this off.
Yeah, you're right. If last week was, because I think it was the way that they won given the circumstances against Cronulla, if they beat Melbourne this week in Melbourne, it's got to be up there.
Yeah, but just have a look at their spine. That's their direction. They got Tedesco, they got Brandon Smith, they got Keary. They got some fair players there. They got some grand final winners in their spine. You think that, and with the way Lindsay Collins was playing, you think there's enough leadership there in the pack, you know, with Radley and Butcher.
It is, but
I don't think they're as weak. Because if you look at Melbourne
their
Storm,
most dangerous player in the first half last week was Manu.
Yep.
He's gone.
Yep.
Suwali's been in great form. He's gone. Billy Smith's been absolutely outstanding for as long as I can remember. He's gone. That's a lot of people to lose against a Storm side with so many stars.
It sure is. Now, Sam Walker was dropped, then he was injured, but now he's back. And the Livewire halfback says he learned a lot during a tough second season in the NRL.
Yeah, it was obviously a tough sort of period there, but yeah, I think I've got the club was really good to me. Medical staff was awesome. I couldn't thank them enough. Get me back out here. I didn't know what I was going to do, if I was coming back or not, and I guess all I could do was just focus on myself and doing what I could do, which was gym and watching as much footy as I could. So I spent as much time as I could doing that sort of stuff. Everything sort of happens for a reason, and it's all part of the journey. And yeah, back playing. I'm playing in a final, elimination final against Melbourne in Melbourne. It doesn't get any better than that, and I'm looking forward to that.
It is all part of the journey, and you live and you learn in life, but especially as a rugby league player, and he's learnt the tough way this year. But the one thing about Sam Walker, regardless of his inconsistencies, especially early on in the year, he's that type of player that has those, that can come up with big moments. And he made that look so easy when he came up with the field goal, right? It was like shelling peas. He come up with the deflection off the kick, but that's because he rolls the dice, and he tests the opposition all the time, every time he touches the ball. So he's made for these big games, Sam. And although he's had a tough year, his form's been great the last couple of months or since he's returned. Why is that?
well, I think it's experience. I think that we expect so much from our halves. Only the select few come in and at 19 or 20, I'm talking about an Andrew Johns and a Cleary Watt, they just come on the scene and don't get dropped to reserve grade. So some of these guys really need to learn the game. And then I think he's come into a system and he was struggling and and sometimes you can struggle for form, and a lot of the Roosters players were, and he was going back to reserve grade just to find his game break. And I don't think, it's the kick in the bum that people think it is, and then he got injured. So that's the time out. But I think it's experience, because under the spotlight now, and we see it with a lot of players, how much pressure that they're under
just
when
that
they wear
moment
the
there, right, when he kicked the field goal. You can't underestimate that. Like, you're a young half who's been dropped and then pretty much told that you're not cutting it with the first grade. You come back in and you're playing a final, elimination final, and look how easy he made that look.
But both you played at big clubs and you've been in the halves. There's more pressure on you, isn't there?
There is, and that's what's so impressive.
And can you handle it at 20 compared to a 25, 27-year-old?
Yes and no. Sometimes when you're younger, you handle it better because you don't realise how much the pressure really is. You don't until you get older and realise how much a game means, and the criticisms and the all the eyes that watch you, and you got to be not scared of failure. And he's one of those halves that he's not scared of failure. He wants to win, and he doesn't think about the negative result. He just thinks about what's in front of him, and that's what holds him in good stead, and that's why he's going to be so valuable to any team, but especially the Roosters moving forward.
Which is why it spoke so much about his character and his self-belief, that in the big moments he wanted the ball in his hands.
Yes.
And not only did he want the ball in his hands, he went for broke. He went for the big pass. He went for the field goal. And like you said, after the roller coaster season that he's had, you would think he would have come back a bit gun shy. But no, he's come back guns a-blazing.
Yeah, that's what impresses me most by a country mile, and that is his toughness. Boys, I sat on this bench desk only 4 weeks ago talking to you about how he was going to go visit a specialist to seek more advice on his bruised ACL at the time. And had he got a different result, he was going to be out for the season. So he comes back, and look at his body shape. He's not the biggest half in the world by a country mile at all. Like he's a little man, and has come back when the whips are cracking, and he's been dealt some physical blows as well by teams that think they can outmuscle him. He's been standing up, and now he's icing field goals. I think his toughness is what has impressed me the most.
Yep, he's been great. Now let's have a look at their opposition, the Storm lineup, and they've got some changes here. Justin Olam, a lot of people were calling for him to come back into the team, and Craig Bellamy has answered. Remus Smith moves to the wing. So in saying that, they've got a couple of really good players that come into this squad after that loss last week against the Brisbane Broncos, and they were hammered. They were hammered, pillar to post, not even in the ball game. But as Gordy said earlier, there's no better team that bounces back better than the Melbourne Storm. Do we just expect that to happen this week?
I do. Yeah, I really do. Back at home, and everything that you've just spoken about, Brave, the fact that we don't see that type of performance from the Melbourne Storm, and they would be hurting, and they'd be peed off with themselves. Right? And there's no greater motivator than when you know within yourself you're playing poor and you've got one last chance to go and prove it. The players they're bringing in, they're capable NRL players and proven NRL players.
Not only are they capable, I would argue that they're probably they added more. Like Olam at his best, and Remus Smith
is a big loss.
Sorry, you got me there. That's definite. Coach is a huge loss, but Remus Smith has held his own the last couple of years.
Justin Olam's had 33 tackle busts in 15 games this year.
But it's not that defensively, those halves, without too much to go to.
Yeah.
The pressure that he's going to put on the Roosters halves, if they're going to go to the line, I think Olam's going to put a lot of pressure. So he's going to, and then there was a couple of soft tries for Melbourne Storm. They don't normally let, the Katoni, Staggs and the Reece Walsh sort of waltz through like that. You think Olam.
And keep in mind with Olam, he's been dropped for a reason. He's been down on his form.
Yeah.
Craig Bellamy's been disappointed with the way he's been playing. So he comes back, not just because, you've been surplus to needs as far as being chosen in first grade or reserve grade. You've been poor. Come back to the NRL with a point to prove. And that's got to be frightening.
I have no doubt in the world the big guns for the Storm, Munster, Hughes and Grant, they won't play as bad as they did last week. The concern, though, is that I just think that the Broncos forwards certainly exposed the Storm pack. The Storm didn't have a bloke that ran over 100 metres. I think Nelson got about 95 and he was by far the most, and he's starting on the bench again. And the Roosters forwards have been going gangbusters. So I reckon if the Roosters have a chance, they're going to. That's where they'll lead the way, which is only going to make it harder for the big three to stand up.
No, I agree. Their forward pack's got to really deliver this week, and if they want their spine to bounce back and be better than last week.